Annabelle was a beautiful woman, inside and out. All the more reason it was such a shame when David strapped her down to his bed and began peeling and flaying the flesh off her skinny little legs with his buck knife and then his teeth. What's up, guys and gals? Iceman here. Welcome to Chilling Tales. Sometimes you just gotta laugh the horror away. So this one, I decided I should tell. I've been holding it from you for some time. It's a heinous urban legend of a man who lived in Upper Michigan. One that's quite close to home for me. The news hid this story. They were terrified of it getting out too far and hurting their town's reputation. But what this man did was absolutely hideous. So, Annabelle was a girl who lived in northern Michigan as well, and she wasn't David's only victim. That bastard. But Annabelle went to a small high school, was into the arts. Pale skin, really thin lady, actually did some swimming. Would dye her hair red. She was beautiful. After high school, she never did go to college. Lived with her father, who was all she had. This girl was vibrant, but not very trustworthy. All the more reason it was such a shame that David got his nasty little hands on her. So, David was a boy similar to Annabelle. He didn't go to college either. He was sort of a short, fat, white guy. Okay? And just trying to give you guys a good description of him and a good painting of what went on here in Upper Michigan. He had an affinity for surgical methods, this man. He would study on the internet how various surgeries were done. He had almost a taste for flesh and blood from youth. And I don't know where this fetish came from. Why don't you tell me? Why do people get into cannibalism, you know? It's just weird. But in this region of northern Michigan, there were these husky black bears. Big, fat bears with these big yellow bacteria-ridden claws, long sharp teeth, etc. Big husky bodies on them. David knew about the bears, and as a child, he actually discovered a little cublet outside of his father's house that was backed up to just miles and miles of national forest. So David took this little cublet and twisted its paw until it would make a little hissing sound at him. He'd twist its little paw and then let it go. Then he'd grab it again like a cat. He'd grab it by the skin behind its neck. And David ended up slicing this little thing to bits. This poor little black bear cub. It was an anomaly because it was parted from its mother. I believe that its mother was hunted down by hound hunters, chased up a tree and shot. And its little cub was left to fend for itself. It was probably desperate when it seeked out the attention from David. Little did it know that David was a very demented child, and I think that was the first time he tasted raw flesh and blood. This young boy at about 8 years of age. So, fast forward about a decade and a half or so, This man's in his late 20s, still living with daddy. Working nothing but a part-time job, playing video games and so forth. And these fetishes of drinking blood and eating flesh never left him. Of course, being a man of short stature, it was hard for him to gain the attention from the women in his community. David was prideful, but I think a bit dyslexic. He had a hard time spelling out words, and there were some things about him that were just incoherent. But on the same token, he was very knowledgeable and condescending in nature, always correcting people and trying to get the edge of them psychologically and mentally. I think this is how he was able to woo some women, through manipulation and similar methods. So he ended up approaching random chicks not far from his town. At this point, he had an old rusty pickup truck that he inherited from his father. He'd drive into town, go to the malls, go to the stores, and approach women. Now, being of small stature, it was hard for him to gain any momentum, but there were a few that were willing to spend time with him. One girl in particularly worked for a fabric shop, this cute little chick in her early 20s, sort of a very petite stature, which I think was very fitting for David. She was actually shorter than him. Nice little roundedness to her body, cute little face, and he ended up getting her number, asking her if she wanted to hang out. Now, David's father lived on his own. His parents were divorced. His father worked at a factory. He was gone most of the day and paid no attention, just sort of let the house get consumed by the woods around it and the woods that stretched far beyond. So David, growing up, was able to run amok in these forests. Like I said, he tortured that damn black bear cub, and who knows what else he did back there with small animals. Point being is this was a place he could embark on some privacy with any woman he was able to woo and get back there. So he invited this girl out for a hike, and she accepted his offer. And that was his first victim. Way out down the trailhead of this property beyond his father's house, David had a sort of shrine set up. Fallen trees and some rocks around a fire pit. He'd go out there, torture animals, and just enjoy himself at night. Bask in the fire. Maybe play video games on a Game Boy or read some graphic novels, whatever. He ended up meeting this girl at a coffee shop. She left her car there, and he drove her to his father's property, which was a couple miles from the coffee shop. Now, there was no record of him hanging out with her. He just set up these plans with the girl, so no one was able to really trace the fact that she went missing and who was connected with her kidnapping. They went walking through the trails. He took her to the spot. He ended up taking her back to his father's house and was able to incapacitate her. Not really sure how he did it. I think he had one of those rags with fumes or something, but he knocked her out. And he had this hideous fetish. He loved long, skinny, pale legs. And I think he began finding them tasteful, which is why he ended up chaining this woman in his dad's basement. That was kind of like a dungeon. His dad would rarely ever go down there. His sister used to live in this house, and she had her bedroom down there with one of those old metal-framed beds. He chained this woman to it, incapacitated her, and started eating her calves. He'd use his long, crooked teeth and dig them into her calves and looking up at her, sucking her blood like a vampire. He had a fetish with the legs, some sort of sexual, heinous fetish, to the point where he wanted to peel the flesh off of them with his crooked teeth, as if he were eating a chicken wing or something. Now, this girl was incapacitated while he was eating part of her calves. Somewhere in that endeavor, he was able to get her out of the house, clean up most of the blood. He lined the bed with plastic before getting this woman on it. He drug her out to the woods, to that fire pit area of his, sliced her up with his buck knife, buried most of her remains, and tried to cover up all the scents. And that's when the bears started coming in. The following day, he goes out there and he realizes her carcass has been dug up. And he notices a bear about 50 yards from the fire pit chewing on something. So David manages to scare the bear off and realizes it's this chick's leg. All right, it's the thigh down to the femur. David hacked it off when he tried to bury her, so the bear must have took this leg out of the cache and took it out in the woods and started chewing on it. Strangely enough, I guess they have a similar habit. Something they have in common, David and these bears. So David started getting a little nervous, and he dug the hole even deeper, buried all her body parts, spilled gasoline all over the dirt, and lit it afire, set it ablaze, trying to burn the blood away and the flesh remains and so forth. Now, somewhere after that, he got away with this. The cops never found out about who the hell took this girl. All they knew was her car was left abandoned at some local coffee shop. There weren't any cameras, any security cameras. Her car was just left there. People figured she was kidnapped or went out trafficking, whatever. But she was gone. That's when David reconnected with his old friend Annabelle. Annabelle was willing to go on a hike with him as well. He took her down this rigid trail, the same place where he buried his previous victim. They see the birds in the area, the sounds. They talk, they laugh. He met Annabelle through a mutual friend. This girl had trust problems, but I think it was partly due to David's short stature that she was willing to move in with him in terms of just being a little bit more physical and intimate. She was willing to consider him. I think he struck less fear in her than a guy who of taller stature would. David ends up burying his blade in the back of this girl. When she was walking in front of him, he prepared and just severed this blade into her spine, getting the nerve. And this girl collapsed to the ground, and David kind of fell on top of her with the knife, twisting the blade, paralyzing this girl. He must have done research on where to stab somebody in the back to paralyze them. And it didn't quite paralyze her right away. She was fighting and screaming and lashing her arms around. But he ended up just twisting the blade and ripping it around, and it was inside of her spine, tapping the spinal cord and severing it up. And he ended up getting the spot. This girl couldn't move her legs or arms. She could still move her head, and she was trying to bite him. But David quickly overpowered her and drug her over to the little spot by the fire pit. This girl was paralyzed, but he still ended up chaining up her arms, pinning her to the ground with heavy rocks, and began eating her legs while she was still alive. David's teeth, he would skin a big gap in her legs, and then he'd start running his tongue up it between her flesh and her bones, and he'd start peeling off the flesh with his teeth while watching her, like he was a dog or something. This guy was a real demon. Now, I don't know if people these days get demon possessed or whatever. I'm kind of using that as a form of expression. But I'm curious what you have to say about that in the comments. Who the hell would do this, you know? Eating the flesh of somebody while they're still... I mean, he got off on it. He got off on torturing people and seeing their pain. And there was some sort of mixed sexual desire intertwined with this, where he loved the legs so much it wasn't enough just to kiss the legs or to copulate with a woman and touch her legs or rub them with your fingers or even squeeze them a little bit at the ankles. He actually had to rip the flesh off and eat them and drink the blood. So yeah, it was kind of like a one and done deal with these victims. And this old bastard ate this girl's all the way up to her thigh, just running his teeth up and down, blood everywhere. This poor woman. And somewhere in that, he ended up crushing her skull with a heavy rock. Took a big old stone off the ground and lifted it over his head and just smashed her skull with it. After he had his way of eating her, and I don't know, he might have done something else. I don't really want to talk about it in this video. I'll cut you guys a little bit of slack here. And the reason I talk about these urban legends right now is because Halloween's right around the corner. These videos are great for perspective. We got to be careful who you trust out there. Because, I mean, this guy, he kind of reminds me of the guy from the movie Psycho. The guy played by Christian Bale. Like, he's kind of together. He's very clean cut. Yeah, he's a little short. But he has an extreme ego about him and his very strong pride complex. That's what this guy was like, this David. Annabelle was destroyed, to say the least. So David ended up burying her without cutting her up. He just buried her body in the same spot. He started getting a little... he started losing his concern for getting caught, I think, that he got away with it once already. So he buried her body in the same spot where this other girl's carcass was still rotting. He spilled gasoline all over the top and lit it afire. Now, he goes back home and he takes notice that this shit's all over the news, right? These two girls missing now. They're looking for him. Not David, but they're looking for these chicks. Another one's gone missing. It's been about 36 hours. So these reports are starting to, wind up. David gets really concerned that they're going to catch him. So he ends up going back to this spot. He takes his blade. He takes an axe. He takes more gasoline. He wants to cut up their bodies even more, dig them even deeper, burn everything that he can. And he does that. He takes them out there. He digs up these carcasses of these women, douses them in gasoline, just sets them ablaze, these flames just roaring up to the tops of the trees. He's just trying to get rid of anything to do with these women. He takes the plastic from the bed, throws it in there. He takes the sheets, throws it in there, just burning everything, a massive, unquenchable fire. The fire starts dying out. He's staying over there. It's getting really dark and late into the night. The smell of boiling flesh and blood encompasses the area, and I think that's what attracted the bear. It was later in the night, and Dave was just sitting on a stump with his knife in his hand, just sort of inspecting the fire, just watching the carcasses of these women burn. And somewhere in that, a black bear came up behind him and attacked him. Now, David turned around and buried his blade into its stomach, but this bear was so powerful it broke his neck. It kept the knife. The knife was buried in its tummy. He couldn't pull it back out. Bears are really, really dense. They're flesh and muscle. And I think it stuck into the bear's ribs, and the knife got wedged in there, and he couldn't get it out. David couldn't rip it out to stab it again. So the bear tackled him to the ground and sort of wrapped its jaws around his face and just started squeezing and thrashing him, just trying to rip his face off. While the smoke, it's still smoldering. You could still smell the blood and flesh from these women. But this bear ends up killing David right near this fire pit where these women's carcasses were burning. So the fire ends up spreading. Even though it was smoldering, it started catching on the grass, and it started a whole forest fire. And that's when the fire department came. They flew little planes overhead. They got the big fire truck, and they dug all sorts of trenches everywhere to try to stop the spread of the fire. And David's body was found on the ground with his face ripped off from this damn bear. And then the carcasses of these women hacked to pieces, some of them remaining, some of them already eaten, were there as well. And they found David's dental work, just his teeth some of them were half pulled out. He was putting so much effort into gnawing at the flesh of these women's legs. He got so intense with it that it crooked his teeth. It'd make his teeth all crooked and bent, and it'd start pulling his gums. It'd separate his gums. He got so into it. I think that he got into a sort of hyperactive state when he would do it. But that's what they found. Ended up putting it together. This guy was a perpetrator of cannibalism and a 2-time first-degree murderer. All right? And this damn bear got the vengeance on him. I mean, they never found the bear, but they could tell his face was ripped off by a black bear. Yeah, what a disgusting story. But again, I tell these things to give us perspective. Be careful who you trust out there. Be bear aware. Let me know if you guys like this story. Hit the thumbs up button. I'll be telling y'all more, all right? Hope you're prepared. Hope it ain't too much. Like I said, this stuff is important. Even these urban legends, they're important to keep note of because you never know. But hope you all have a good Halloween. I'll be posting more videos before Halloween. So stay tuned to this channel for that, and I'll see you tomorrow with more chilling tales from the Iceman.